jumping back into the show and into the third segment on today's episode, more around the Dallas Cowboys and their star wide receiver, Ceedee Lamb. Of course, everybody knows that Ceedee not being at the voluntary workouts thus far. A few weeks now have gone by since these voluntary workouts have started. And, he is playing on his fifth year option. The team exercised it last offseason, and still, yet, there hasn't been really much movement in this negotiation process between Jerry Jones and the Cowboys and Ceedee Lamb on trying to find an extension for him. Other In other teams, we've seen Amon-Ra St. Brown get an extension. I'm blanking on a name now on who else got an extension. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith as well. Wasn't paid that much, but he also got an extension. So that makes at least three, and two of the receivers that got those extensions really resetting the bar on the highest paid. It was Amon-Ra first getting that massive deal with the Lions. Then just a day or two later, A.J. Brown supersedes him and he becomes the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. So you have already other teams making movements around this, and not Dak Prescott, but the Cowboys. I will talk about Dak Prescott, but the Cowboys, I don't want to say they're trailing behind right now, but with these other teams making moves now, the bar is getting raised higher and higher. It's more expensive and more expensive for the Cowboys to try and re-sign everybody. Time is starting to, be more of an emphasis now when you're talking about re-signing Ceedee Lamb, who arguably had a receiving season last year that compares to any of those guys that received extensions, and he still hasn't gotten one. That's something to keep in mind. With this talk about Ceedee Lamb not being at their workouts, I wouldn't classify it as a holdout officially right now because they are voluntary at the end of the day. No real time to panic right now if you're the Cowboys, but you would like him to be there, but if he's not, it's not really the end of the world. A lot of people skip out on these. As an example, Justin Jefferson, I'm sure last year thought he might have got a contract extension but didn't. He skipped out on the voluntary workouts, and he ended up playing last season for the Minnesota Vikings. So, these different scenarios play out specifically to that person. But talking about holdouts and how those have played out in recent memory for the Dallas Cowboys, you look at a guy like Zach Martin, held out. You look at a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, ironically enough, now being back on the team. Both of those are the Cowboys players that have held out recently into training camp for the Cowboys, and both were given long-term deals before that season even started. So, looking at that, if you're Ceedee Lamb, seeing how that has worked already, it could be an avenue that would fit you if he's willing to miss out some OTAs, some of training camp potentially to try and negotiate and get really some more traction on these contract negotiations. I don't see it as a bad idea, but again, we're still early on to talk about how that could impact, the locker room and how that makes other people feel. But one person that talked about it, I mentioned before, Dak Prescott, spoke with Patrick Walker of the official team website about Ceedee Lamb not being at the voluntary workouts, to which Dak Prescott responded, "We're roommates all of July, so if that's the case, that'll be fine. No worries. I know what he's doing. I know how he's preparing. All the confidence in the way he's preparing and how he's doing." So from Dak Prescott, nothing really to make of this. If Ceedee Lamb is doing his own thing and he's just prepared, it all makes sense, and I could agree with that, being Dak, and not to mention he also trying to figure out a contract situation. He could feel like that, but also say he doesn't get a contract extension and this is the last year with the Cowboys. How much, genuine interest is there from Dak to say, oh, Ceedee has to be here. We would love him to be here. If he's not even going to be here next season, how much sincerity is that in that statement? But I won't come on here and say that he's lying. He's being ingenuine by any means, but that's also a thought you have to think about. If you're Dak, if you're reading these comments, Dak might not even be there next year, so how does that affect how he feels in reality to Ceedee and all these other guys talking contract negotiations? Because as much as you want to see your best friend, your roommate, as Dak put it, get paid, you also don't want to be forgotten about and left to just move on. If this team really says they care about you, you also want to get a contract extension. And for now, Ceedee Lamb is set to make about $18 million on that fifth-year deal, but he is eligible now for that franchise tag in 2025 to keep him around. So that is an option to explore. One that I haven't brought up before just because, Ceedee coming off of a big year, you don't want. Think about if you're Ceedee Lamb and you come out of this massive year, then you have to wait another year to try and play great, to try and live up to those expectations, and then at the end of that, you get rewarded with a franchise tag. That's the least likely thing you want to happen if you're Ceedee Lamb, but it is an option for the Cowboys, like I mentioned, if they have to try and work something out with Dak or maybe even Micah Parsons. $18 million on a fifth-year deal now, and then having the option to franchise tag him again to keep him around another year, I'm sure is something that is being discussed with the Cowboys. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Nobody likes the franchise tag, but it is an option for the Dallas Cowboys. It is reported, obviously, that Ceedee Lamb wants a top contract, wants to be paid like one of the top receivers after a monster season. Why wouldn't he? So already he is filling into those expectations that many people would have thought about heading into this season, having the season that he had. He wants to be paid like one of the best. That means it's going to cost the Cowboys about $30 to $32 million per year for a massive contract with Ceedee Lamb. Plus, you have to throw in there all the guaranteed money, obstacles you have to go through and make sure it all correlates with both parties. That's going to take time, and we are in May, I will acknowledge. So I am bringing this up, but again, it's not time to panic right now, but people are being asked about it. The discussion is being had of the what ifs. Ceedee's not there for training camp. What if you don't get a contract extension done this offseason? That is something logical to think about up until now, because the Cowboys haven't really shown anything to make anybody think or expect that they're going to get a deal done with Ceedee Lamb this offseason. It's happened before, but Zeke and Zach Martin haven't had to deal with who's to say a comparison, Dez or DeMarcus Lawrence also being up for extension in that same time period. It was always you have to focus on Zeke or you have to focus on Zach. Maybe both of them at the same time, but no more than two to one person you have to focus on. That's what makes this whole scenario about the Cowboys' big three, essentially, on their team so fascinating, because all of them want to get paid, should get paid like top guys, but with the Cowboys and how their salary cap has shaped out, not really signing anybody in free agency, mostly in part because they want to keep these guys around, but how much does that play into team building and how competitive this team is? All these variables just circle around everybody's mind, especially mine, trying to figure out what they're going to do. It does play into these decision-making decisions, and also, on this topic, Brandin Cooks was another one that was asked about Ceedee Lamb and his contract and what he thinks about it in regards to how much Ceedee Lamb should be earning. Brandin Cooks talked with John Machada of The Athletic, and he said on Ceedee Lamb, "The guy is a freak. He deserves everything that's coming his way. I hope he gets every single dollar so he can and is the highest paid receiver in the league, because he is the greatest receiver in the league, no doubt." And that's going to cost him. It's just back to what I just said before. $30 million is the absolute minimum, if that be the case. Ceedee Lamb wants that, and it's still very early on. Holdouts have worked so far for some of these guys like Zeke and Zach Martin. Will Ceedee Lamb be pushing to that extent? He has said already to TMZ, I believe, that he will be in Dallas come the season. He will be playing for the Cowboys. So that's a positive sign, but a lot can change. You look at other situations, most notably the T. Higgins situation. Similar. he requested a trade, then he said he would be okay with playing in Cincinnati. Now, again, it's popped up that after the Trey Hendrickson trade request, now T. Higgins again is pressuring the Bengals to try and get something done. That's being resurfaced again. A lot can change in this offseason with these receivers, and say somebody else gets paid. Say Brandin Ayuk gets paid a lot of money. Then not only will all the attention be on the 49ers and Brandin Ayuk staying or going, being traded, whatever it may turn out to be, but all the eyes, you can bet, will turn over to Dallas again and look at the Cowboys, look at how Ceedee reacts to this deal and how that relationship develops over this offseason if they just keep waiting for other guys to get paid and still expecting Ceedee to get a lot of money. I'm very interested to see how they do it. I think Ceedee, if I'm picking again, I think Ceedee will definitely be one of the ones that get paid by the Cowboys. My biggest doubts probably lie around Dak. I've said it before. Micah's way too good. Ceedee's way too good to let go of. I think Dak might be the odd man out here, and this being another way for the Cowboys, if Ceedee Lamb holds out, it would be a great strategic move for the Cowboys to kind of prioritize Ceedee Lamb and have his name at the top of the list. If it's worked before, these two holdouts have worked prior to this happening, why wouldn't it work again with Jerry paying all of his guys this money? It's a great way to ensure you get that money, and I think Ceedee at the end of the day will get it. It just depends on when, not if he gets it, but when this contract comes for Ceedee Lamb. But in the meantime, we move on with the rest of the show. A few more topics to talk about on today's episode. I mentioned Adam Peters, him reacting to some of the offers that he got for that number 2 pick, and how at the end of the day, nothing really impressed them. Plus, we're going to be reacting to the Netflix comedy special last night, The Greatest Roast of All Time, roasting Tom Brady. I'll give my reactions to that and what I really enjoyed about that special from last night. If you didn't get the chance to see it, make sure to go and do that. You won't want to miss it as much as you wouldn't want to miss the rest of this episode. So stick around. We'll be right back.